You know, back when I was a kid, welcome back to Harbor, when I was a kid, we used to go as a family up to Lake George, New York a lot. Well, something pretty scary happened up near Lake George, New York last night. It involved the Republican candidate Carl Paladino going after New York Post reporter Fred Dicker. Now, this is a frightening scene you don't often see, even in politics. Let's watch.
Says you've descended into the gutter by suggesting he was involved in extramarital relations when he was married with no evidence. Do you have any evidence of that? And if you don't, isn't that going into the gutter?
Well, a guy that's been in the gutter and spent a good part of his life in the gutter with Andrew Farkas, he should think twice about trying to characterize me.
Well, you're a lawyer. You've heard the term.
Yeah, and I'm also a lawyer, okay,
yeah.
that very
What evidence do you have for something that most people would consider a smear?
I want to know why you sent your goons after my daughter.
I sent no one after.
Oh, I want to know,
Fred.
Fred.
What does that have to do with your charge against Cuomo? Do you have the evidence or do you not?
Fred, fingers don't.
I will, at the appropriate time, you're going to hear it.
He's got three daughters. How can you say that about him?
Oh, I have a daughter too,
Fred. You talked about her.
I have a daughter.
You brought it out.
Fred, that's it.
Stay away from me. Heck with you. What evidence do you have?
Listen, all right?
You ever hear about when did you stop
send one of your goons after my daughter? Send it one more time.
The guy's easy. Come on. Hey, stay away from me, man. Don't touch me.
Men go in that bathroom.
Who are you? Who the hell are you? I'm trying to ask him a question.
Go ahead, ask me a question.
Do you have any evidence for the charge you made?
At the appropriate time, you'll get it.
This guy's the Attorney General of New York.
And you're his stalking horse, Fred Dicker.
You're
his stalking horse.
What's the evidence?
You're his bird dog.
You made the charge.
You send another goon to my daughter's house and he'll take you out, buddy.
You're going to take me out?
Yeah.
How are you going to do that?
Watch.
What are you, fighting me?
Well, let's go to Earl Lewis of the New York Daily News, and let's go to Joe Klein of Time Magazine. He's just been going across the country getting a look at our country's mood. I don't think this is so much about a mood as a person. Carl Paladino threatening a reporter, threatening anybody to take them out. What's the nature of that threat, Earl Lewis?
Well, he's used it quite a bit. Carl Paladino has said it about the leaders of the legislature. He's said it about his political opponent. Now you just heard him say it about a journalist that he had a dispute with. He says, I'm going to take him out. And that's part of his overall theme about cleaning up Albany, throwing the rascals out, getting rid of people who have caused problems. And it's a growing list of people that are on Carl Paladino's problems list or enemies list.
So it has an unusual meaning in his case. You're saying it's not a physical threat to kill him?
No. You know what? The reporter he was talking to, Fred Dicker, has, I think, a green belt in karate. So I don't know if that was really a realistic opportunity or option for Carl Paladino. But no, he says it quite a lot. But the anger is real. The frustration that he's trying to channel, it's been a major theme of his campaign. He's been saying there's just no room. I mean, when he talks in very rough language. When he criticizes the head of the state assembly, for example, he doesn't just say, I want to get him out of there by voting him out. He says, I think the guy ought to go to prison. You know, I mean, really wild kind of charges. And so this has been the temperature of the campaign.
All right. That's a legal remedy. Joe Klein, I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure of what I'm listening to up here. When one guy threatens a guy and says, I'm going to take you out, it sounds to me more severe than just, I'm going to talk to your employer, Mr. Murdoch, about you. What do you make of that charge, that threat?
Oh, it's kind of low-key New York politics as usual. But I think, Chris, what you're looking at is a larger trend here. You have within the Republican Party, you have a majority of people who have been angry at their incumbents. They've voted them out. They voted in these amateurs, and I've seen them across this country who really don't know how to behave like politicians. Yeah. And sometimes that's refreshing. Other times it's really embarrassing.
Well, let's go up to Maine to another center of activity, another ring in this fight game, you might call it. Paul LePage, he's a gubernatorial candidate. Let's take a look at this little scene up in Maine. And it also involves anger and tough talk.
And as your governor, you're going to be seeing a lot of me on the front page saying, Governor LePage tells Obama to go to hell.
Well, there's interesting language. And now let's go ahead and take a look at more of Paladino talking to Kate Snow, one of our reporters. Let's take a look at that scene. Here's Paladino. Let's take a look at that other side.
That's okay. It's all right to show people that you're angry. It sort of gets the discussion going.
Who are you angry at?
Angry at a government that took advantage of the people, a government that is self-sustaining. They've been eating at the public trough. We call it the Friends and Family Club.
Earl, you talk about the anger. Well, you talk about the anger in New York, and I want Joe to pick up on it because he's been traveling across the country like Paul Simon, looking for America, and apparently finding it quite red-faced. You first. There's anger out there.
There's definitely anger out there. The upstate New York in particular, where Carl Paladino hails from, they've been betrayed over and over again, and they're absolutely right to be angry. When you adjust for the value of a home, the property taxes up there, the taxes, the overall tax load, it's the highest in the entire nation. And they've lost tens of thousands of jobs. I mean, people's kids just move out of state, and it's been happening by the hundreds of thousands every year. It's a real crisis, and it hasn't broken through the media bubble down here in the city, and Carl Paladino is trying to break through that bubble and trying to basically grab the state by the lapels and say, we're dying upstate. We've got to do something different. We've got to change what goes on in Albany. The missing ingredient, as you say, Chris, though, is what's the real plan other than being outraged?
Yeah, Joe, tell us about your trip.
Well, listen, I don't see as much fist-shaking anger as out among the people as I do on TV. There's some of that, to be sure, but what people are really is freaked out. In past economic downturns that you and I have both covered, Chris, people are concerned that their kids aren't going to be able to live as good as they have. Now, they're absolutely convinced that their kids are not going to live as good as they have. They're absolutely convinced that we're going to be number 2 to China. They're absolutely frustrated with our politicians for not dealing with the jobs and the trade and the outsourcing issues. For every time I hear the war in Afghanistan from average Americans, I hear China 25 times. And they look at Washington, they don't see anybody addressing this.
Well, the interesting thing is at the same time you hear people say they're against government. They think government's too big. And yet they're holding it responsible for not getting their job back. It seems like they want a bigger role for government. They want it to get in there and Bigfoot the economy and make it walk right. Isn't that a contradiction, Joe?
Yeah, but there is no consistency, ideological consistency in the American people. I talked to a cop out in Michigan, in rural Michigan, who won't even tell me why he hates the president. Obviously, the president's some kind of a secret Muslim. And then I say, well, what do you think, we should do to make the country better? And he says, the government has to provide more jobs. There's no consistency. You see it, there's no such thing as a straight-ahead liberal or a straight-ahead conservative in this country right now. What there is an awful lot of frustration and a sense of fear. You can't imagine how many people, as Earl was just saying, you can't imagine how many people's mortgages are underwater in this country, and they see their neighbors walking away from their mortgages, which reduces the value of their homes, and they're saying to each other, God, were our parents like this? They would have never done anything like this. What's wrong with us? What's happened to us as a country?
Yeah. Yeah. Joe, it sounds like the president, I just talked to the former president, Bill Clinton, is right on this. He says the anger is the only vote they're casting right now. They ought to think of alternatives and what they're really voting for or against rather than just pounding their fist and going in and raising hell, basically, in that voting booth. But I know the mood. I appreciate what you're reporting here. And certainly I haven't seen anything like this guy, Carl Paladino. I hope I don't see too many guys like him in politics. Anyway, maybe I'm wrong.
Have you seen
Earl Lewis, thanks for joining us. Joe Klein from Time Magazine. Earl Lewis. Well, there's quite a menagerie out there. Anyway, thank you, Joe Klein, who's been out there checking out the cages.